Hey, what's going on? Ed Fletcher here, and I'm not in Colonial Heights. I'm near Center Parkway, and I'm revisiting 2016 story Dazion Flenaugh, the South Sacramento man who was killed after a foot chase here in this neighborhood. This morning I was thinking about what the mayor and city council did and the changes that will bring. And I want to talk about that and the impact of that kind of through the lens of this case. So 2016, Dazion Flenaugh comes to this neighborhood in the morning and is perhaps on drugs, perhaps in having a mental health issue, but is trying to get into backyards and disturbing people's property, and the neighbors are kind of fending him off and trying to shoo him back to wherever he came from. Eventually, they call the police after he broke a window, and they get him into custody at first, and they put him in the back of the squad car. And during that time, they go and they start interviewing neighbors, and the man becomes increasingly agitated in the back of the car. And when the police come to open the door to, I guess, let him out, to talk to him, whatever, he runs away. And a foot chase begins, and they're like, oh shit, we gotta get this guy. So I'm not exactly sure if it was the original officers that eventually catch him, or it becomes different officers. I don't have all those details at the ready. Anyway, so the man, they chase the man through the neighborhood, and in the end, they say that he came at them with 2 knives. They gave a verbal warning, and they shot and killed the man. So I just had a conversation with the neighbors, and I think one of the things that they felt from all of this is that first they felt apprehensive about calling the police in the first place, and that there should have been somebody else to call, and 2, that the police couldn't contain the situation. And the neighbor actually said the officer joked that he won't be jumping any more fences. So a lot of disturbing things about this. So I was the day cops reporter that day, or I was kind of the substitute reporter doing day cops, and somebody at the desk alerts me, whether it's scanner traffic or something else, that, hey, there's been a officer involved shooting, South Sacramento, can you go over there? And when you first go, you know actually almost nothing, and you're just kind of trying to figure out the scene, and then you're gonna knock on some doors and try to talk to neighbors and try to figure out what's going on. Of course, the cops at the scene won't tell you anything. They'll tell you that you've got to talk to the public information officer, and then so you're trying to gather what may have happened based on what little information you have. And then within an hour or so, the public information officer will gather the media together, and they'll put out a statement, and everybody will race to write that story. And the story we got from the cops, again, was that after he got away, they chased him. He came at them with a knife, 2 knives, and they shot him. At that time, there were no body cameras, so we don't have footage of what happened that day. And after this case never made as much news as the Stephon Clark case or any of the other cases. After I wrote the first day story, I kind of went back to my normal duties and passed the story on to the other police reporters on the team. And it's one of those things where, in the light of what's happened recently, causes you to perhaps want to look back and revisit and figure out, did this turn out the way it should have, or was there something fishy here? The DA determined that there wasn't anything fishy here, and that the officers committed no crime, and that everybody, well, move on. The officers were eventually received some awards for their behavior at the Sacramento PD. So what's happened since then? Well, one, the Sac PD has adopted some changes in their use of force to discourage foot chase and chase like that. Chase like this, chase like the Joseph Mann case, chases like the Stephon Clark case. It'll be interesting to see how that is interpreted by or implemented by the force, and whether that actually results in fewer law enforcement killings. The other thing that has changed is Darrell Steinberg and the city council passed last night a reform to create a non-law enforcement response team that could be dispatched in situations like this. So I don't know all the details, but perhaps a law enforcement and a mental health response come out to a situation like this, and they can collectively decide whether this is a mental health thing or a law enforcement thing. But the days where law enforcement is the only option, hopefully, are behind us, at least in Sacramento. One other thing that the city council did was to create an office, a inspector general, and that's a person that would have the ability to independently investigate and report on officer-involved shootings or incidents or things that are sketchy. There are a lot of people that are very highly skeptical of this reform at this time and whether or not it meets the moment. And I would say that if you asked the community 2 years ago, they would love to have a inspector general, somebody on the outside that looks at it. But there's a lot of concerns about the structure of the job, how it's going to be implemented, and whether or not it will actually lead to reforms and better behavior. One thing I want to point out is that this reform is impacting Sacramento. So kudos to Sacramento for implementing this, but I'll also say that the county begins less than 100 yards away, and there those reforms will not be employed or in play, and the normal sheriff response will be the sheriff response, and they don't have any sort of mental health teams intervening like that. And I would wager that there's most cities in America don't have that sort of response. But while we're talking, the larger issue that I think we need to solve is that we need the thin blue line and the police brotherhood to stop protecting bad cops. Recently, reviewed this thread where an ex-law enforcement officer was talking about how he was on a case, another officer punched somebody in the face and broke the guy's nose, and after the incident, the other cop was like, "Hey, we need to get our story straight," and the good cop, the good apple, was like, "We don't need to get our story straight. I saw what happened," and he wrote up his report, and the next day he gets written up for bad behavior because they said he lied in his report. And eventually he's driven out of the department and is now like a private investigator because law enforcement needed him to care more about his brothers in blue than being honest in police reports. I think we found that police will lie for each other and they will protect each other, and we need to be more important than protecting each other. So until that changes, we still have a long way to go, and it will be a game of cat and mouse. Can you invent a system good enough to prevent bad actors from doing bad things? What we need is the system of law enforcement to self-correct and to draw out the bad apples so that we can progress from this period where it's an us against them. And while it's an us against them, it's always going to be a challenge. But this is the big lift, and I hope that we can make it, and hope that we can find ways to reform the way law enforcement is applied so that it is just and fair, and then maybe we don't have to defund the police. Anyways, this is Ed Fletcher, Ever Forward. Thanks for checking us out.